I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome everybody, back to Anatomy of a Movie. Today we are doing the 2014 film Selma, directed by Ava DuVernay. I am your host, Marisa Serafini. Joining me I have...
Hi guys, this is Sara Stretton, and look who I brought with me.
Look at that!
JT here from Box Office Schmoes Know, doing a little anatomy.
Look at that, JTE. Welcome, JTE, to our panel.
Thank you.
And it'll be good to have a guy's perspective on this film as well. What did we think of this film overall for the American Civil Rights Movement and just historically the events depicted from now?
What I have to say is I'm really glad JT is here because he was the first one who kind of raved to me about Selma. So I don't know if you're still going to stand by that raving.
I loved it.
Okay.
It was one of my favorite. It is my favorite of the year.
Yeah. So this is how I was introduced to Selma, was JT coming to the room being like, "Love Selma, everyone needs to see it." So I saw it a little late in the game, saw it last week. Loved it as well. Completely understand why people have been raving. Also understand why people are kind of feel like got gypped this award season, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yes.
Because overall, I found this movie just so well made. The screenplay itself, I think, is one of the strongest points. Yes, it's visually beautiful. The cinematography, the shots, the acting, so much. But what makes this movie spectacular to me really is the screenplay, like what they cover, the scenes, how poignant they are, what they're talking about. Each scene is so strong in itself, but also fluid. Because there are movies where you're like, oh, that seems great, but it just feels like a mashup of scenes. This one, strong scenes, fluid, built upon each other, built for the characters. There were so many characters in this. There were so many people who were represented, and I felt like I knew each one of them well, and I cared about each one of them. Mm-hmm. So I just think it was an amazingly made film. Really excited to talk about it, break it down. Yeah, that's what I have to say so far.
You said a lot there. Let me just say I love this movie, obviously. I told you it was my favorite of the year. For a long time, Whiplash was my favorite of the year. And I saw this like almost a day before I was going to do my top 10 list. And I saw it and I was kind of blown away. And maybe I was a little bit in the moment. But I feel like if I went and saw it a second time, which I do plan on doing, I would feel the same way because I love a film that gives me an emotional response. And when it comes to me, when I rank my films, I'm like, not only are they movies I'm going to go back and watch again, stuff that really made me feel something and made me feel for the characters that are being displayed in the movie. And this movie, okay, you guys just did American Sniper, which is a very sad movie, and I had some man tears at the end. But this movie, I had like at 3 moments, had some man tears coming out. And I'm just like, holy jeez, this is 20 minutes in the movie and I'm already crying. I was like, come on. So that really kind of catapulted to the front of my favorite movies of the year. And let me just say another thing. Autobiographical movies, they're really hard to pull off. Yeah. American Sniper it does like how many years is it actually covered that movie? Almost a decade.
It's more than that. Because you have flashbacks of him as a kid and all the way through him coming back.
I love how they took the Lincoln approach. They did not say we're going to do the whole MLK life. There was no flashbacks of him as a kid. They took the Lincoln approach where it was like, in Lincoln, it was a small period of time where Lincoln was trying to get something passed. Very similar to MLK in this movie. And they just kind of take this one event and they use that as a way to show different things that happened to him and kind of his ideas and his beliefs, which kind of tells you everything you need to kind of know about MLK without doing the whole Act 1, 2, 3 story. And I thought it was fantastic.
You learn a lot about him, and it just shows how each step he made in his life was a battle. It wasn't something, especially for us covering the period of time after I Have a Dream, which I think so many people of my generation kind of look as, okay, like, great, I had a dream, that was like the climax. And in my mind as a kid, that's where kind of my history lesson on him stopped.
Yeah,
And I thought,
for a lot of people.
great. And then everything got so much better. Like, that's what I was kind of taught. So showing this, that it was like, that was a pivotal moment. He was acknowledged. He was acknowledged by the world. He got a Nobel Peace Prize. But guess what? It was still a battle in so many areas, and it was still hard and horrible in certain parts. And so I was just like, I was really glad they brought this era of his life, or part of his life, to the screen.
And I liked it because, like you said, Sarah, a lot of people, you hear Martin Luther King and you automatically think of his famous Have a Dream speech. But then what else is there? And I love how this film shows a whole nother story that a lot of people our particular younger generation, us being like 20s, 30s, like we might not know, but the older generation who have lived through it and remember this, like they know. So it's a good, as in a way, a history lesson to our generation. Like all these problems were still going and still resonates to today. And we really need to focus on that. Just the stories that there's so much that hasn't been told. And this was a beautiful depiction of what went on after the I Dream speech, because Martin Luther King didn't just stop there. He kept going. He kept fighting for civil rights. And this, I admit, I wasn't well versed in the whole Selma march, and this was a beautiful story to clearly explain everything that went on.
Yeah, it was a great way just to focus again on this one small step. You talk about the dream speech is like the thing everyone thinks of. So it could have been really easy for them to take that route. But by doing this, it shows, there's a lot of steps in the ladder to get to that height point. And I love that fact that this is just a small slice of a small battle that kind of turned the whole tide. It was kind of the beginning of the whole thing. And
well, it's the aftermath. This is after I Have a Dream.
Wait, I thought it took place right before.
No, it was.
He gets the I Have a Dream speech. He then gets the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
And then
right.
it's still things happening.
Don't skip history class, kids. I did, and look what happened.
Don't skip the
That's what
first
these
10
movies are
seconds of
for.
this
Is it
movie.
the first 10 seconds of the movie?
Well, when we opened up this film with the audio, and it said that Martin Luther King had a dream. So it's already established that the speech has already happened.
That's why he was going to Lyndon Johnson and
he's-
everything
yes,
already.
Yes.
Wow, I totally misread that.
This immediately happens right after that. So, which is a good place that, again, people wouldn't know what happens.
And that's why I was like so fascinated, because I had never heard of this before.
It's okay, JT. That's why we have Anatomy of the Movie, so we
Thank
can
you so
correct
much.
all your judgments.
We break it down.
But yeah, I just love hearing this story, and I think this should be shown in schools. I said this when I did a review. Like, I would totally show this in schools to kids who are learning about Martin
they are
Luther King.
pushing that. They are pushing that.
They really?
There are multiple theaters that they are doing screenings of Selma for free, especially for students
Totally
in
agree.
7th, 8th, and 9th grade. So I can't remember what states it's in, but they are pushing for students to see this and for the youth to see this. And I know on the same note, or on the same track, Selma, the city of Selma is showing these screenings for free.
Nice.
And on top of that, thousands of people have flocked to Selma to remember, to pay their respects, and to honor the Martin Luther King's memory and everything he fought
What's really
for.
surprising me is this is like the first real Martin Luther King film that I could think of. Like, there's never been a real theatrical film about him, which is shocking to me.
There's been documentaries,
Yeah.
but nothing really depicting Martin Luther in just an biographical way.
Yeah, which I was shocked when I heard that. I was like, really? I was like, there's got to be something out there. There might be some lower level films out there, but we're talking major theatrical release.
Exactly.
It's the first one I could
There's
think of.
definitely there's smaller things out there. His character him as a person has been depicted, but not to this
Exactly.
magnitude
Yeah.
where it is the focus. He is
Yeah.
the focus, and we're gonna learn something about the historical events that happened for a wide release. Exactly.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about just how this film started off in development. It was originally supposed to be directed by Lee Daniels, known for The Butler, which is where
Really?
he, David. I'm gonna butcher his
David
last name.
Oyelowo?
Yeah,
think
Oyelowo.
that-
He's probably gonna
Oyelowo.
butcher the name too.
That is
So
probably wrong.
David Oyelowo, he was in Lee Daniels because Selma was actually read back in like 2007, and David was originally attached to this from the beginning, but they were having problem with funding, and so he did Lee Lee Daniels the butler instead, and that got off the ground faster. And then after that, they came back to Selma.
It kind of became a choice between the butler and Selma, and he chose the butler.
Well, the other interesting is like they're not allowed to use Martin King's actual speeches in this movie.
Yeah.
Because apparently I heard Steven Spielberg actually bought a lot of the rights.
It's actually a studio. It was done, I believe, through Steven Spielberg, but a different studio other than who produced Selma has the rights to the speeches. So Ava, when she came on board, she rewrote supposedly about 90% of the script, which included reworking a lot of his speeches.
Yep.
And what she would do, I believe, according to the gossip columns, she would go on long hikes and just listen to his speeches over and over again, and then she tried to get the message across just with new words. And she picked out, and just by listening to him on repeat, she would try to pick up his vocal patterns. One of the main rules was she would say that he liked to repeat a point 3 times, but in a slightly different way. But just really get the message across. And I think she did an excellent job with his speeches.
They were excellent, and it surprises me that something that has a history element like that, like these speeches are historical. I didn't know you could copyright something like that. I feel like it should be open for whoever wants to interpret it.
Yeah, it's a little strange to me too, especially because does that mean like I Have a Dream is copyright?
That's what I'm saying.
We all said that in 5th grade. We all stood up on the stage, and each of us said a line of the I Have a Dream speech. And I was like, I guess I'm gonna have to fight whatever studio owns them because I spoke those words.
And it's hard because if you think about it, the Happy Birthday song is copyrighted. So it was like such such iconic songs and speeches that everyone knows and you think would be easy to say. They have rights on them.
I guess you could say that it would be Martin Luther King's estate that would own them.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
And I guess if they make an agreement, then that's their prerogative to make an agreement.
Why wouldn't they give? I just feel like if you're gonna have something that historical, you should just be able to be free. Be able to do whatever they want with it.
But despite that little obstacle, I still think they got the messages across loud and clear.
Yep.
And then we also had the writer Paul Webb. There was actually some controversy between him and the director Ava because over writing.
Really?
And because of Paul's contract that he gets the title and credit as sole writer. Their issue was that Paul Webb and Ava DuVernay, both of them aren't part of the Webb Guild Association, so it wasn't credited in that way. But Paul, in his contract, he gets sole credit, even though Ava did a lot of rewriting.
Wow, that's DGA could be really stiff with that stuff.
It's hard. We've brought up Ava. I know this is probably diving into this a little bit too soon, but I just want to talk about her role in this because yes, the speeches she did I thought were incredible. The writing she did was incredible. The screenplay, how she shot it, absolutely amazing. And it's kind of a bummer because I feel like the more I hear about how much she gave to this film, the more I'm kind of saddened because I feel like a lot of people are like trying to downplay her. Like some people, she didn't get nominated.
Well, yeah.
You look at the writing credit. Like, she didn't get the writing credit. Like, yeah, there are people out there fighting and being like, she got snubbed and we know she wrote this. And, like, people are fighting for her. But the reason they're fighting is because people are, she didn't get nominated.
Yeah,
people,
she should have.
And she's not put as a writer. Like, that's why people are fighting because she is, as people are titling it, being snubbed.
I was worried the movie wasn't going to get nominated for Best Picture. And which is funny because this came out the same day, I believe, as American Sniper in New York and LA. And look how this movie has done compared to American Sniper. And I believe this to be a much better film than American Sniper, in my opinion. And I'm just curious why American Sniper just is exploding. It did more money, $90 million on MLK weekend than Selma did. That is the perfect weekend for Selma to come out, and it pulled in like $8 million.
Because you're talking about, like we talked about this on our American Sniper review, like who they targeted, who they marketed to. They marketed to all the veterans, to the families, to the women, everyone. As this is a character analysis of this guy whose story is worth telling. MLK story is just worth telling, but they didn't do the same marketing. This marketing was way more targeted towards the film lover, towards being critics' darling. Maybe they could have they could have used Oprah a little bit more.
Yeah, okay.
I think
in their
they used
marketing
her enough.
strategy.
The power of Oprah did not come through.
But I mean, critically, and for the people who've seen it, people love it.
This thing was 100%. The first 2 weekends it was open. I think it was 98% last time I checked.
98, yeah.
The reviews are universally
American Sniper's right
loving
up there
it.
though too.
I think
with its reviews.
What's the percentage on Rotten?
It has an A+ cinema score.
I'm talking about the reviews for critics though. But I guess the cinema score is more important,
But
huh?
Selma, yes, for Rotten Tomatoes, every time I checked, it was like 99%. And I can't remember a movie that was that high for this long.
I totally agree. Yeah, and that's why
on it.
it's just surprising to me that the movie hasn't done better. That's the only reason I'm saying, because I feel like it's a much better film than American Sniper, but I can understand why that's being, more people might be interested in seeing it. It's got action, it's war, it's more timely, but MLK, to me, is just, like I said, is my favorite movie of the year. I think anyone should see it.
And also, it's just, if you think about it, the Selma story affects more Americans than it did what American Sniper did.
Mm-hmm.
We were fighting a whole nother country, a whole different set of people. And Selma is really hard hitting. And there are still people today that are affected and remember all these events and whatnot. So it's just a lot of what happened, who was there, and who remembers it, and who really wants to relive these type of history events.
Yeah, I think it's just a more important film. It's awesome.
I mean, I think that people should see both of them.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I really liked American Sniper. Don't get me wrong. I liked American Sniper. Just like
I like Selma more than I liked American Sniper, but I think that people should see both films.
Yeah.
I do understand both of them have the potential to make you sad.
yes,
Definitely.
definitely.
American Sniper, for me, it's an ending feeling of at the end of that movie, I just felt solemn and quiet and like, okay. For Selma, oh my gosh, I was like the whole movie fighting back tears the whole time. And I understand that for some people, that is not the type of movie they want to see.
Well, there's highs and lows. There's a lot of lows, but there's some real highs in Selma.
But even on the highs, I wanted to cry.
I guess. But it was
Like happy tears. It's like,
happy tears or sad tears.
You
I
did
got
it,
you.
but like it was constant.
Yeah, it was. But also, it might be the casting too, a little bit, because American Sniper had
is a bigger draw,
and Clint Eastwood is a humongous draw. I mean, we're doing a lot of comparisons to American Sniper, but yes, for films that came out at the same time, same kind of relevant issues. In some, I mean, we have Oprah.
You've got those British accents.
And we have the British accents. We'll definitely get into them. But originally, when Lee Daniels was a part of it, there was a whole different cast attached to it. We had Hugh Jackman, Robert De Niro, Liam Neeson, Ray Winstone, Cedric the Entertainer. That would have been a completely different film.
Lenny Kravitz.
Yeah. It would have been a completely different film.
Yeah, let me tell you, like all those guys, great actors. But I love the fact that I didn't know a lot of the actors going into this movie. There's not a lot of big names besides Oprah.
It felt more real.
Exactly. And
Oprah and like, I mean, I know Tom Wilkinson.
Of course,
I
Tom
know
Wilkinson,
Yeah.
there are the really small parts like Giovanni Ribisi, Tom Wilkinson. Who's the guy that played J. Edgar?
Yes.
Oh,
And he's also in like.
He's in a lot.
he was in he was on the Schmoes once too. It's horrible.
I know
we'll
exactly
get there.
who you're talking about.
Yes. Dylan Baker.
You got it.
Totally.
Bam. He was Dr. Connor in Spider-Man.
Yes, yes, he was. Yes, there were some good names attached to this, but funny enough, they weren't the leads.
No.
Which was really great. They were the supporting cast, and I think they did a phenomenal job as supporting cast.
I think the cast all around this movie was fantastic. Even there was one scene where an actor was playing Malcolm X. I thought he did a really good job. That he could have came in and done a real, over the top kind of performance, or you could really, be bombastic with his performance. But he gave a real small, subtle scene. It was with Dr. King's wife, and I thought it was one of the better scenes in the movie.
I agree. I thought that, especially because the audience has its own perspective of Malcolm X, so you don't need to play up a Malcolm X character to get that across, because it's already going to be projected on you from an audience. From what we know about Malcolm X, from what we know about Martin Luther King, what we know, you just need to be subtle.
Yeah.
Because people are going to put more on you. And if you're over the top reaching for someone, that's called doing an impression. It's not called.
And speaking of subtle, the very almost next scene is him giving a speech, Dr. King, about Malcolm X just being assassinated. They didn't show it.
No.
He just drops it in the speech. I was like, wow, they could have easily, like, some movies would have cut and showed it, or who knows what else they would have done. But it was just in his speech. It was one line, and you're like, oh my God, okay. And speaking of Malcolm X, that's a film directed by Spike Lee, which is like 3 hours, covers the entire life of Malcolm X, which is the opposite way you could have gone with Selma. But like we said, they took this one slice of life approach, which I thought was great.
I think so too. And let's get into the directing. Ava.
Yeah.
Ava DuVernay, she's mostly known for indie films, and she started off as a film publicist.
Yeah.
And actually she was on the set of Collateral back in the day with Jamie Foxx, I believe.
Yeah, Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise, that film where she realized, she had that epiphany. It's like, I could direct, I can make films. And then she transitioned from the film production. And then with the help of Oprah backing with finances, this movie had a $20 million budget. But it looked phenomenal for what for what little money she had.
And she's done really beautiful films before. Like
What's some of her earlier films? I'm not that familiar with her filmography.
She doesn't have anything big. It was more, she opened something else in festival in the last couple of years, and Toronto.
Did anything else
and
get
she
theatrical?
also did a I want to say it was a documentary about hip hop that was really well received.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she did. I'm almost positive that it was a doc, and it was on, I believe, hip hop, and it, like, people loved it. So she's gotten a lot of critical response in more of the festival circuit. This is definitely her big.
Yeah, her big. I mean,
theatrical
after
debut.
watching this, I want to go back and see some of her other films because I was so impressed by how good a job she did.
Yeah, one of her bigger films that really started getting her recognition was A Middle of Nowhere, which won an award at Sundance.
Oh, really? Wow.
And then she directed an episode of Scandal, so she had a lot of little micro projects here and there. And then the studio had faith in her to start this film.
Wow, she took her chance and she killed it.
Yeah, and then also having Oprah being a part of it really does help too. But they had a really nice working relationship.
Yeah, and she was a very small part in the movie, but very effective. She's the first person you see in the film, basically.
Yeah, Annie Lee.
Yeah.
And Annie Lee Cooper.
I just have to speak to that because,
Yeah,
like,
go ahead.
Oprah, I love Oprah. She's awesome. I was, like, so just not surprised that she picked this role that she wanted. Like, I could see her advocating for it because it was just an example of something that was so unjust for someone who was definitely, like, should have been voting. And then on top of it, then she was the character who knocked the guy out and, like, stood up. And I was like, oh, Oprah, I know exactly why you wanted to play that. It's the strong woman who is smart and is not going to stand for any of these things. And I was just like,
do you guys expect her to be in the film a little bit more? Because it's a fairly small role.
It is a small one.
well,
but
she gets two key scenes.
Two key scenes,
Yeah.
but
Two key
in the very
scenes.
beginning of the film.
Two key scenes, and then she comes back and is part of the march.
And also
Yeah.
to add to that, Oprah originally wanted to be just to be a part of the film and, like, backing financial and whatnot, but she didn't expect to be in the film. It was actually Ava who suggested this role to Oprah to play Annie Lee Cooper, only
Why
because
not?
I'm just not surprised at all.
yeah, only because Oprah, there was a moment where Oprah saw actually the real Annie Lee Cooper
Okay.
mentioned that she was a big fan of the Oprah show.
Oh.
And she would watch it religiously, eating tuna sandwiches, and that just connected with Oprah. She's like, yeah, because that's what I would totally do watching my own show. So she connected to Annie Lee Cooper, and that would be like, yes, I want to, depict someone who's real, who understands me, and I understand her.
Well, let's not forget, Oprah was in The Color Purple. She was Oscar nominated. Did she win the Oscar that year?
The Butler.
I know she was nominated.
She was an Oscar.
If she did win, it was for The Color Purple, Steven Spielberg's film. She's a great actor. She just kind of chooses when she wants to do it or not.
Yeah. I mean, she's a
she
very
can.
busy lady.
Yeah. She can.
What I will say, though, is you mentioned that Oprah only has kind of two key scenes and plays a pivotal point. But there's so many different characters in this movie that do have a very limited number of scenes and do make an impact. You mentioned Malcolm X's scene makes an impact. Let's talk about the guys from SNCC. don't have a ton of scenes either, but you remember them. You know who they are. You have I'm totally forgetting her character's name, but the lovely woman who makes all the food.
Oh, yep.
Yep.
She also kind of highlighted in 2 main scenes. It's that where she's helping the guys come in, helping feed them, being part of the team, and then also when she gets pretty brutalized on one of the bridge walks, like she's highlighted two real scenes, and you remember her, and that's constant with so many people besides Martin Luther King and besides his wife Coretta. Like there are so many characters that you really care about that don't have a ton, like President Lyndon Johnson, George Wallace, like all these characters who you do remember. They had a perspective, they had a value in this film, and really only had about 2 scenes.
And the scenes really hit. Like the scene you're talking about, the kid from SNCC. There's a whole car scene where he's driving with Martin Luther King, and he's describing about him and his friend. They're getting attacked because they're in the wrong part of the neighborhood. Scenes like that just brings, even there's scenes where MLK, you know, he's not seen as like a perfect guy in this movie. And even he wavers at times. And it's scenes like this with these side characters that really, you know, validates what he's doing and gives him like the, trying to think of the word, but it's just great to see these characters.
Film.
It's great to see how these character people show why he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah, that's why I give the credit to the screenplay, because you, as much as I just said, you care about each of these characters and they have a life and a value. On top of that, they also serve a purpose. In that one, you cared about him, you knew who he was, and he also highlighted part of Martin Luther King's life. Oprah, purpose, you cared about her, but she also highlighted what was being wrong, like and
voting.
what people could do. Like every scene was just so poignant because it showed so much. And that's why I was just like, this was so well thought out and so well planned.
We talked about all the great supporting actors and the good ones. Let's talk about some of the bad ones. You got Tim Roth playing the evil governor. Who else would you say is the bad guy? I mean, the sheriffs are almost like characters to the point where they're just like they're
the sheriff.
The sheriff was actually.
Oh, he was a
he was a real guy
Totally
that
understand.
like was at the helm of everything, and
despicable. He was a despicable person.
And it's really sad thinking about like such a man existed that helped execute all this.
A town I mean, the way people thought back then, it just mind boggles me.
And it really wasn't that long ago.
And that's what's
really
scary.
wasn't.
That's what's crazy when I think, oh my God, my
Generations are still
grandparents
alive.
grew up with this.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Tim Roth, I thought did a serviceable job. I think he didn't have a lot to work with as much as like maybe Tom Wilkinson or some of the, you know, better actors. But I mean, he's basically just a complete despicable person.
This is what I'll say. This is what I'll say. I was supposed to dislike him, and I disliked him.
Yep.
And you disliked him, and they did it their job. And this film, I feel like, really pinpoints in like who we should root for and who we shouldn't.
Yeah.
And who's the antagonist and who's protagonist. And everybody who might question the lead or supporting or like the reasons why we're doing any of this, you automatically peg them as maybe the bad person who's against. It's like, no, because our generation, we know what's right and wrong, and we know that they're trying to do something. They have this purpose to, you know, go for their voting rights, and anyone who's questioning it is like, okay, why are they not against it? They're automatically bad.
Well, speaking on that, how do you think a lot of people, there's some controversy about Lyndon B. Johnson, how he was portrayed in the movie. Did you see him as the villain a little bit at first, or did you just feel like he was somebody that was stuck in a tough position?
I think he was the person who was caught in a rock and a hard place. And it's being a president, a lot of times you probably are, because, you know, there's so many people you have to please in a way. Not so much please, but like you have to really just help everyone in any way possible, and maybe get that word in, but still have to wait. And
it's a real power struggle. I felt like.
It is power struggle. It's looking for the better of everybody, despite hurting anyone in the process.
There's a great line where he goes, "You got one problem, I got 1,000,001 problems." And it's almost like he doesn't want to, you know. Back then, especially in politics, it's all about power struggle, I felt like. And I don't feel like Lyndon B. Johnson was going to let this guy come in, tell him what to do as president.
Yeah.
This is what I'll say. Like, I viewed Lyndon B. Johnson's character in this movie as being in a hard spot. I kind of understood his mental plan. They made that apparent. There is controversy because a lot of people are people who knew Lyndon B. Johnson have come out and said that he was very much in support of the civil rights movement and that this portrayed him in a negative light. To which Ava has responded saying that this is not a historical film and that she's a storyteller, that this worked for her story. This is where I think that things kind of get testy.
Okay. Because
you put... I'm going to try and say this in a this is gonna be hard to say.
Okay.
This is gonna be hard to say. I'm gonna try. So don't murder me if I get it wrong.
Okay.
I think that the essence of this movie was being like, people, you need to see this part of history that made an impact and that was important, and you should know it. That's to me how this film was branded. To me, it was not branded as, I want to kind of explore Martin Luther King as a character and do my interpretation of how he must have acted. This wasn't that. This was like, I'm going to show you the hard facts of what life was like, and this is what happened, and this is what people went through, and it was difficult, and it was gritty, but he pushed and persevered. That's what it was telling me. This, to me, was advertised as a historical film. And being that it was advertised as a historical film, I do want things to be accurate. And if they're not accurate, I want you to tell me at some point, like in the credits or something, that like something was wrong. So for me, has been said, Selma, people have said that people who knew Martin Luther King and were part of this situation said that it is very, very accurate. That he's accurate. The speeches seem right on point. The tone of the environment is right on point. What happened all seems accurate. And then there's people saying that, but Lyndon B. Johnson's wrong. And I kind of feel like I'm getting mixed messages. Because when you present something that's 90% true and 10% false, the 10% false kind of turns, people start to believe it's true. Because you've surrounded it by true things.
Yeah, I see.
So if you're going to be like, well, I changed this 10%, I think you need to put that at the forefront. I think you do need to acknowledge it. It is a historical memory that you are changing for people. And so if you're changing someone's essence, especially a president who did make positive impacts, I think you need to like put it at the end. Like, this is mostly based on true story. Like, Lyndon B. Johnson did do great for things for civil rights. Martin Luther did,
Yes.
I just think you need to acknowledge it because you've surrounded it by true facts.
And also, like, Ava, the director, has mentioned before, like, she wanted to show Lyndon B. Johnson he had his voice and he threw in help whenever he could. I mean, he was the one who passed the federal protection for the march to happen. So, like, he did as much as he could. And she also, from the storytelling point, she said, like, she didn't want, like, quote unquote, like a white savior to come in to save the film, to save the people.
That's for story.
I can understand that, and then that might be also where the controversy lies too. But I think they presented Lyndon B. Johnson the best that they could.
See, I disagree. I think that in her trying to say, like, I don't want a white savior, she did, like, kind of
alter the truth a little
bit. His character a little bit. And I'm fine with her doing that if she acknowledges it, and it doesn't have to be me searching out that he wasn't like that. It's like someone else shouldn't have to come forward and defend him. Someone shouldn't from his side shouldn't be like, hey, just to let you know, you were wrong about this. If you're gonna change it and you know you're changing it, then you need to be the one saying you're doing it. You need to be the one making that common knowledge that I did change this for a little bit. I know he was a really good guy and fought for this. I changed that for my story. I don't want you to be I don't want you coming in second. I don't want you like pretending that it wasn't changed while everything else was true. That's my thing.
I wonder if she used the way she portrayed Lyndon B. Johnson as a way to like almost show how a lot of politicians probably were. Maybe using him as like a vessel for, instead of just having a bunch of different actors, he just kind of said, all right, here's the middle America kind of white perspective through this one character. Yeah. Which I can understand if that's what she's using him as.
That's storytelling. Yeah. And like that is her right. I'm not saying not to do it. I'm saying be honest about it.
Yeah.
Or like show what the truth is.
Has she been saying against it? Like,
so she said like this isn't a historical piece, but this has come out after people were like, you showed this guy in a negative light. I think I think you need to be the one who's like, hi, warning, I did this. Or like, hey, he was an advocate. Like, I just think it shouldn't be being called out by people on his team. Like, people shouldn't have to come to the defense of someone's image being tarnished.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
At the end of the film, when he's giving his speech about passing the law and everything, does it almost feel like someone who's like being dishonest in a way? Because the whole movie, you kind of see him fighting against it, and then he gives this roaring speech, and everyone's like clapping and like, oh, well done for you. And you almost feel like, all right, he's taking credit for something that he didn't really want. Did you feel that way?
That's how the movie frames it.
That's how the movie framed it. That's all I'm talking about. Is that the way the movie framed it? Do you think that's a little,
I think
wrong for them to do that?
I think that it's a little framed that way, and I think it's also a little framed where like he meets
Tim Roth's character.
Character, and it's like, oh, I don't want to be you.
Yeah, he's like,
so I'm gonna change.
So I'm gonna be the good guy.
Yeah. So like, hold on. It's like reality check. I sound like you. I don't want to do that. Let me change my perspective.
Which is admirable, but at the same time, the way he's portrayed all
for
before
storytelling, for characters, for like a point of view, checks. It didn't pull me out of the movie.
Yeah.
It's just on a side note of, it's more of a general specter where like I feel like if you're going to make someone worse than they were in any way, then you need to be like, hey, just to let you know, he was a really good guy.
Yeah,
like that's the only thing I feel.
Yeah, and I think the overall message is that yes, what I saw from the film, he was always for it. He just couldn't always, voice his opinions exactly for it, or like there was always someone stopping him or obstacles. But in the end, it shows that he was for it, and he got their voters registration, and like everything passed.
Yeah.
And he, being the president in that position, people are going to look to him for solidarity and validation.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. One of the scenes I love is one of the first scenes is where Martin Luther King goes to visit Lyndon B. Johnson. And it's where he goes, you got one problem, I got 1,000,001. He's like, people are dying in the streets, Mr. President. This cannot wait. Lyndon B. Johnson, he just comes off as very like, he's like, I can't deal with this right now. And I love the approach that Martin Luther King, people forget, there was only like 4 channels back then, like 2, 4, 6. I mean, there was only
CBS
4 major networks. Yeah. So the way Martin Luther King used media to show, like, he's like, I love when he's talking to the people. He's like, we know this is one of the most violent cities. That's why we came here. Because the cameras are going to capture what everyone needs to see. We know not every state is like this, but if you show the worst, people are going to stand up.
And also they used that against him, too, because everyone was following MLK, and they knew when he wasn't going to be in Selma. Therefore, the people in that area who was against everything used that as an advantage. Like, okay, cameras aren't on us. Now is the time to really protest and act out and against and do like all this injustice upon these people.
And that first march he wasn't in was the
one at night.
The one at night, yeah. And that's when they were like, all right, well, King's not there. It's not going to get as much attention. And
it's at night and it's dark lit, and that's where we lose.
Can we get to the?
I want to say, Jesse.
This is where we lose the kids.
Jesse,
the kid is the grandfather.
Jimmy Lee Jackson.
Oh my
who's
God.
actually real life character or real life people, and that is really what kickstarted and set off the whole idea of the march to to Montgomery.
Which comes to the most heartbreaking scene maybe in the movie for me is when he's at the morgue. And the grandfather is looking at his grandson, and Martin Luther King comes to visit. And the thing for me is like, I think they didn't go for like a great actor for the grandfather. He just seemed like almost a suitable actor, but who's old enough where this guy actually went through maybe some of the stuff that you're witnessing in this movie. So he brought the history to that scene, and I felt so bad. That was like like I said, this was like 25 minutes of the movie, and I'm like tearing up. I'm like, are you kidding me right now?
Yeah.
It's one of the most heartbreaking scenes I've seen in any movie in years.
And I felt like his character was just another motivation why all this has to go down, like why they had to go through the protest and the march, and because he's old enough to kind of lose hope that like this will never happen, and he might never ever see the Voters Registration Act get passed. Like he might not, it might not affect him. So to have that like glimmer of hope from him that like he is a person that can get that chance and that they're fighting for.
And the speech that he gives after the kid dies was one of the best speeches, and seeing the grandfather and the mother and the audience, and yeah, it's real powerful stuff. And that's where I think some of the writing, like you said, she came up with these speeches in her own way, and she couldn't use the real material, but man, she knocked it out of the park.
Completely. I agree. These are some of the most poignant scenes. And the acknowledgement, one of the things it says is like, there's no words, and like, I can't do anything for you. And just, you felt it so much. And it was just another character for me that added so much to this film. It wasn't in it. The grandfather, the son, the mother, all those scenes. These are just more characters they gave life to.
Yeah.
And they made important without making them the star.
And Ava did say emotionally this was the hardest scene to film.
Oh, she did?
Yeah,
because I totally
understand. The only thing is like that, because they were all in that area, and they shot it at night for such a long time that it was just emotionally, because she got so attached to these characters, like it was hard to see Jimmy pass away in such a brutal way.
And it kills me that David Oyelowo is not nominated for Best Actor, because that scene, he pulls it off not only for the fact just the speeches that he gives throughout this movie are fantastic, but that one scene, he doesn't even say that much in that scene when he's talking to grandfather. You see almost everything that he's going through in his eyes. And I thought just like, this guy was not on my radar as an actor before this movie. He's been in some smaller roles. I believe he was in the first Rise of the Apes, and so he had a couple small roles here and there, but to see this, I'm just like, this guy, how he does not have a Best Actor nomination.
And he had to cover so much ground as an actor. Dealing with heartbreaking scenes, dealing with getting people on your side scenes without seeming like you're speaking down to them. Like his speeches were full of life. Then I felt like every time he prayed, I believed him. I believed that he was praying. Then you have his whole marital scenes. You have him as a father. You have him as a husband. You have him as someone who's struggling. You have him as someone who's empowering. He covers so much emotional ground in this film with what he has to deal with and show. He shows.
Yeah, and credit with the director for not showing him as just this guy who's on a mission. There's that great scene with his wife where, the government leaked out tapes of him having an affair, and there's this whole conversation where she's like, "Do you love me?" And when she goes, did you love any of the other girls?" He literally pauses for like a minute. And you just see him like, he's honestly going through his mind trying to find the answer, and he responds, he's like, no. And yeah, so scenes like that, David, for me, it's a highway robbery that he's not nominated for Best Actor.
I thought he did a really good job acting as well, and I put him under my nominations, I think.
I think he definitely should have got it nominated.
The fact Steve Carell, listen, Foxcatcher's not a bad movie. Take Steve Carell out of there. I'll even take Bradley Cooper out of there before. Take either of those two out. Put in David. I mean, those performances are so much better than those two performances, in my opinion. That is just mind-boggling to me.
And the thing is, like, why I applaud him, because back when he was filming the Butler a couple years ago, he actually was working on like the speech for Martin Luther King, and just like trying to get the persona down and how to portray him. And he showed like a little clip to Oprah, and Oprah honestly said to him, "It's good, David, but it's not all the way there." And so just hearing that from Oprah, like knowing that little bit, just like he had to work from that amount of time so much to get to where he was now, and just in like 2-3 years. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Well, I'm curious. I never saw The Butler. I heard mixed reviews on it. Did you guys really like it?
I have not seen The Butler either.
You? Okay. The only reason why I asked is because I was curious how big his role, because I know he wasn't the star of that film. I was just curious how big his role was in that movie and how good it was.
I only saw part of that movie.
I kind of need to go back. I kind of want to see it to see how good he is.
Yeah. I believe he's the character that Oprah yells at.
Oh, really?
In that film. Like, everything you have and who you are is the reason.
Oh, okay.
It is because of that butler.
Interesting.
That's the person who she's yelling at.
Okay. See, I'll have to rent that one.
That'll be our assignment to go home and watch that film. And everyone else who hasn't watched that film either. But yes, David, what an amazing performance. Just the way his diction on words and being a British actor. And like, I would have never thought it.
Never would have known.
Never thought it. Seeing his interviews, I was like, whoa.
Seriously.
A lot of British actors in this film. Also, another one, his wife.
Yes.
Oh, was she
Carmen
British too?
Ejogo.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, she's also
Wow.
British.
And funny enough, she actually portrayed another, she played Coretta Scott King like 10 years ago.
Really?
At a younger age. And
opposite
also
her husband.
What? Really?
Yeah, so like that was her first role as Coretta, and in that role she was actually, that story took 10 years before the I Dream speech, and then this story is like 10 years like afterwards and later on.
And Coretta King approved of her original performance.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. You always want to hear that.
And I think that's fascinating. I thought she did an amazing job as
So good. I put her on my list for. I put her for Best Supporting Actress, but she didn't get nominated. Maybe the role wasn't big enough.
It's also kind of tests the line between leading actress and supporting.
Really? Because I thought she kind of went away towards the second half of the film.
But if you're talking about she, alongside Martin Luther King, has probably the most amount of scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there was probably a push to put her for leading actress for this film.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because time-wise, she has a lot of time, and she has the strongest, like, second storyline.
Okay.
If that makes sense, because you don't have another female lead that would outshine her in this.
No, I just don't think it takes front stage too often in a movie.
I mean,
I need to see it again. Like, I saw this a couple weeks ago. I loved it, but I need to see it again.
Okay.
But for me, the scenes that stick out is the scene where she talks to Malcolm X.
Okay.
And the scene where she has with Martin, when they're talking about the cheating. Besides that, I feel like all their scenes with her are kind of complimentary or smaller.
All right.
I could be wrong, though.
I could see that. I
Yeah.
could see that. I was just going to say, to speak to this point, one scene we haven't really talked about, which for me, like, I love this movie, so this isn't to, like, be a horrible nitpick, but was one of the first scenes we got was the four girls in the church.
Oh, yeah.
With the bombing. And I thought that the impact of that blast was shocking. I literally jumped. It came like
I didn't see it
mid-sentence, although you do see a girl look to camera like a second before. So
really?
that was
Yeah.
funny.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But I thought that it
Let me
was...
ask you this. When you saw the four girls, did you know what it was that probably going to be that thing?
No. And also,
interesting.
Ava, when she said filming that, she focused more on the emotional aspect of it. For being the female, she came in the emotional approach to the storytelling. And she said filming that with the girls, like, you wanted to really just hear the dialogue that they were talking about. Like, they're looking up to Coretta, so the everyday, and then hearing their voices. We're already getting attached to their lives as they're getting pulled away from the world.
Yeah.
I, for a second, thought it might have been that because Spike Lee directed a great documentary called Four Little Girls. And because it happened right around that time period, I'll admit that when it did surprise me still a little bit, but the second it happened, I was like, I know exactly what's happening here. And
I thought it's such a powerful moment, and like it's crazy, and like the conversation I thought that she built up with them before was done really well. The execution of the aftermath to me was a little strange because she went in, there was slow-mo, it was very much this pulled above shot, it was like a lot of rubble everywhere, but you could very clearly see the four girls, and there wasn't very graphic. It was just the fact that you knew they were gone. And I kind of thought that was an interesting choice, being that if you're going to highlight something that was so terrible, that she made it, to me, they were very just represented as like they were gone, but they were still whole. And like very
How
angelic.
familiar were you guys with the story of the four little girls in the bombing? I mean, you've heard of it, right?
I've heard of it,
but
like I didn't.
See, for me, when it
not too
happened,
much of it, though.
I immediately went to everything I knew about it, and I, learning about it in school and watching that documentary. So I think it might have had a little more emotional impact on me because I was just like, oh my god, I know this is a beautiful way to set up this movie because that is one of the worst crimes that happened during that whole civil rights era.
Yeah, and also I just loved coming from the female's perspective, like she didn't really highlight how exactly it was executed, like no offense, like a male would do, because they'd go in for the action to see exactly how, like, the actual kill and how it was happened, and then she focused on the destruction and like this is how it affected. We see everything laid out.
It wasn't as graphic as it could have been. Like they're like, this wasn't your gritty war movie where there were body parts everywhere.
No, because it wouldn't have fit the movie. I mean, she does show violence in this movie, but I think to show the violence in not a violent way would almost be doing disservice to what happened back then. I think listen, I don't want it to be gory. I'm glad they didn't show the girls like getting good, but like a lot of times, especially later in the movie, when some of the people that volunteered in the march are being attacked, she goes in like super slow motion. It's not like a fading scene that just happens really quickly. She really kind of gives you time to see what's happening and process what is going on And I thought that was a great way to do it, because I don't want to just like Malcolm. I like how she did it for the people that were just, the everyday people that were doing something right. Malcolm X, she didn't show, because I mean that's a very historical figure. She actually paid a little more attention to the people who were just everyday people who were trying to do what was right. And speaking of that, the movie ends with these subtitles of people that some of the things that happen to these people are absolutely horrible, and it sickened me reading some, especially I think one of the last ones was a girl that was
the female
who like was volunteered, and she's shown throughout almost all the marches.
And she died later that day.
And like she was like killed and like
and that
Ku Klux Klan. And I was just like, oh my god.
Yeah, that's what bothered me, because like I didn't really get the time to attach to her.
Yeah,
but knowing that she died just hours after all that, I was still affected. Like people were still dying, despite the fact that all the rights were passed and whatnot. It's like it's still an issue.
It's another battle.
Yes, it's just one right after the other.
A priest was killed by a group of thugs because of he was in a march, and I love the scene following that when they tell King.
You lost a priest from Boston.
Yeah, and he's just like, how many more people does the people have to die who are just doing the right thing? And I think it makes the film just more powerful hearing about these stories.
Speaking of powerful scenes, let's talk about the Bloody Sunday powerful March 7th, 1965 scene when they're marching the bridge the first time, and the security won't back down, and they and the fact that it was broadcasted live on air, millions of people watched, and all like it's sad because so many people knew about it, but they weren't doing anything at that point. There's like just the devastation that's going on with this small town, but such a big issue.
It's so hard for me to understand how somebody could just naturally hate so much. These cops run in there with these clubs and just start swinging with just anger and hate, and I don't understand how someone could be raised to just hate that much. For me, it's mind-boggling. I can't understand it, and that's what's so shocking about this, because nowadays, that's going to happen with different religions, different people, but to see it happen in your own backyard over something so stupid as like a skin color, it just resonated more with me.
No, I mean, I think what we take from it is like her depiction of it was just so. I just remember like the close-ups where it would come to like a bat wrapped in barbed wire.
Oh my god, yeah.
And
they weren't just doing their officer duty; they were out there to
be on
hurt
horses.
and kill people.
Yeah, it was
Clubbing,
just like
tear gas.
That's what it was like. It was beyond. It wasn't portrayed as like, oh, this was someone's job. It was like, no, there's so much more anger and hate behind all of these things, which is like sad and just horrible. And to me, it just kept bringing in my head that like this really wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, I know. It's shocking. It really is shocking. That's why I feel like I said, people need to watch this in schools and present to people and be like, look at how it was back then. And don't ever let it be like this again, because it's just wrong at every level.
Yeah, and the interesting thing I think about this particular film and just shooting the scene is that all those extras were from that area.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they used their own talent there.
Huh.
And so to film this and have the white Caucasian people yell all these profanities to their own community, their own people, and just for this film, like really added a whole nother layer to the realistic nature of everything that's going on. It's like these are people, these are your brothers and sisters. You're attacking each other.
Yeah, and ancestors. They're probably from that town.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got some. America's got some skeletons in his closet, to say the least.
Yeah, but I did like the sound editing and the sound effects that they use for the clubbing. They used like a bunch of different sounds, like bass and tenors, club hitting, just all these screaming sounds. It really added to it, despite the fact like they tear gassed everything. It was smoky, but you could still see and feel everything that was going on.
Let me ask you guys a question, because it's based on real life, or a good portion of it. The second time they go on the march and King gets to that point and they clear the path, and at this point I'm thinking this is the end of the movie. And King's like, turn around. No. Goes the other way. So when I saw the movie, I was like, wow, that was anticlimactic. I mean, like, what was supposed to happen there? But you got to remember, this is based on real life.
But that's what really happened.
Exactly, which I somebody else who was just trying to make a good story might have changed it. They might have said, okay, they're going to go through. And I'm glad that she didn't just take the easy road like that. She actually said, you know what, we're going to stay to what really happened. He's going to turn around. And then, you know, they go to the march later.
He's just human who, like, he has worries and fears, and he really doesn't want, like, because there's a lot of backlash for him turning around.
Oh, yeah, a lot of people are, and I agreed with them.
His own people were angry at him.
Yeah.
But when he spoke, I understood, like,
he's like, I'm not going to take you to enemy territory.
Like,
or
he's
we
just like, I just didn't know.
I get cut off.
Yeah, he's like, I didn't know it was going to happen. Just didn't feel right.
And when you hear him say it like that, it's like he's almost got like a military mind about it. It's like, I can't take you behind there where we could be cut off from our support. Like, he didn't want to risk anyone's life because who knows? They let him through, but who knows once they got further into town.
Yeah,
what could have happened?
They could have easily attacked them again.
And with cameras might not have been able to catch them.
There'd be more people this time. More religious people attached to this. Like all these people that came from all over the country to be part of it and still didn't happen.
Yep.
I thought that was beautifully, as simple as it was beautifully depicted. And just him turning around, he saved a lot of lives that day. He really did.
Yeah.
But then also just made the whole third march way more rewarding, knowing that there is federal security now, and Lyndon B. Johnson got involved, and then this is a national issue that everyone is a part of it, and allowing them to voice their opinions and march. And then even with the footage, the real footage at the end, people waiting on the side roads, waiting for them to come and join the whole march was great.
I love when you ever autobiography or something that's based on true story actually cuts in. Again, American Sniper, I love the ending of that movie because they used the actual footage of, you know, people waiting on a highway and, you know, signs of support and the amount of people that actually came out for them. I love when they do stuff like that, especially when it's historical.
I think it adds a lot to the film. Just like, remember this is true. Like you've been told, but like see it.
And I just want to say this one more time. The last speech he gives at the end of that movie was my crowd almost stood up and just started clapping because I was like, even though, again, I got to give her a lot of credit for whoever wrote it, whether it was her or, you know, Ava. It was so empowering and just, Paul, it was perfect. Even though it might not have been the real thing, I think she completely got what he wanted to say across. Yeah,
people were clapping in my audience. Throughout the film, like at certain speeches.
Let me tell you something. I usually don't clap after a movie's over. Sometimes I find it kind of corny. I was like one of the first people clapping. I was like, let's get this started, people, because this deserves it. And I love how this movie showed. Some movies do this, where they show the character in the name, like almost like you're watching a play. Someone comes out. People were clapping for every time a new actor was shown on the screen, and then the actor who played it, people were clapping, and it was a very uplifting experience. I really enjoyed it.
What I really loved, and I personally didn't really know much about, was that yes, we had Martin at the crux of everything, but all the other people that were constantly with him every single day, standing by his side, that became all these big political advisors and leaders, which was great.
Senators, governors.
Yes, John Lewis was very much a part of it, and he was really young, and he's still very active today. And so, like, all these people that we might not know in history, but were still a part of it and are still a part of it. I loved.
I love finding out, especially when you see a movie like this as historical. I like getting that little thing about what happened to them, kind of. And to hear that they all went on to do great things, and then again, the sadder thing, some of the people didn't even survive the night. Who knows what those people could have done if they survived?
Who knows? Let's talk a little bit about the cinematography. For a small budget film, there were a lot of great shots. One particular shot that I loved was the very, very slow shot. I believe it was the last march, when they're actually marching this time. The long shot from the crane going over the bridge, and then you see a whole flood of people. And also the iconic historical bridge, the Pettis Bridge. I have it in my notes.
Is it Pez? Is that
No. The
right?
Oh my goodness.
Am I going to say it wrong too?
the bridge. The famous bridge.
I got you.
Edmund Pettis Bridge. And just that in a historical bridge that with the name was a dragon leader of the Ku Klux Klan. with the
What?
the irony that's everything that's going on that bridge. Really, really just like America standing up for what they believe in.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I thought
Edmund Pettus Bridge.
I thought there were so many good shots.
Yeah, overall cinematography was really good.
And a really good balance between like your external shots with everything with the bridge done very well, but also a lot of your internal shots that had like there's a lot of like darks and browns and goldens where you look at the jail scene, you look at the church scene,
The
you
car
look
scene.
at
The car scene where they're driving.
car scene's really dark,
Really well lit.
or the funeral there where there's like almost this golden light on him, and like I thought so much of that was really done. I always like when they're in the jail cell like playing with, he seems like he's down on himself.
Yeah,
he doesn't think
he's
he's on.
he's downing himself.
Really leaning on his buddies trying to pull him up, and his companion's the one who's getting like the moonlight, and all of those I just thought were handled really well. And so it was a good balance for me. Each shot, internal, external, everything was lit really well.
For me, almost every aspect of this movie is beautifully done. Sound, music, cinematography, direction, acting,
Editing.
I gave it 5 out of 5 because I can't find anything bad about the movie, to be honest with you. Again, the historical things I understand. There might be some things that aren't completely true, but I'm willing to put that aside for a great movie that's teaching you a great moral,
Story.
thing.
So are you putting it up for best original song too?
I like that
Glory?
song. I dug that song after
Glory?
the credits. Yeah, I dug that song. I mean,
Carmen and John Legend.
what else was nominated? Like
And it's
Lego
nominated for
movie.
best song.
Everything is awesome. It's a cool song.
Begin Again.
But
song.
even the score, I literally, the reason why I made this the number one film for me this year was because I think it nailed everything from top to bottom.
And I think they did an amazing job just executing the message behind everything, like what people went through. These are our own people. Not that long ago going through all this, and just sad that America was at this such a low point in our lives.
Well, it's great that Martin Luther King, he knew not all America was like this, and he knew his goal was to show the rest of America the worst that America had. So I love
they would take action,
and I love seeing the reactions from the people watching it on TV, and they're just having dinner. They got their TV dinner trays, like the guys in a white beard with his wife. They're eating and they're watching. And they're just like, "What? This is happening?" Because it's almost like they had a blind eye to it, and I love how they showed that in the film.
Yeah, I think so. And I love the a simple way of transitioning too, where the slates where you can hear the typing.
Oh, which
and like
was
just
CIA.
like this scene happened, logged, and whatever.
And that's because the CIA was bugging them.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting way to show this paranoia and how much the government feared Martin Luther King, what he was doing.
Yeah.
And some governments saw him as an enemy at times because of the way.
But I liked it. It was simple and effective, but it showed like how long this has been going on, and also kind of in a way just showed the timeline of everything.
Something that was
this
wrong.
happened,
You
this
bugged
happened,
this
this
guy.
happened.
You kept books on him. Now we're using it as information to tell our story.
Against
Hoover insinuated like killing him.
Yeah.
More or less in the film. Like there was so much.
Which is funny. When I was, we were talking about Clint Eastwood earlier. J. Edgar was a movie that a lot of people didn't like. I thought it was okay. I'm a big historical buff, so anytime I see a movie about a historical figure, I really kind of get a little more invested into it. And I was thinking about the scenes with J. Edgar and with Leo in that movie, and how he like bugs him, and how he's like he's not going to get the Nobel Prize, or he's not going to accept it, and all this. And I'm just thinking to myself, man, like what did this guy? I mean, J. Edgar had that old school thinking of. Nothing can change, and everyone who's not 100% with the government is an enemy of the state.
Yeah.
So I was thinking back to that movie when some of those scenes were coming out.
One thing I really have to applaud Ava just as a director, because she's not really known for big feature films. This is probably one of her biggest, if not today, right now, her biggest feature. But this film was shot in 32 days. And such a time crunch, especially with so many people involved in it, and with such great thick content to talk about, to film it in 32 days. And also, Oprah's first day of filming was the same day Maya Angelou died.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So, and Ava even called Oprah, and she's like, you know what? I know we're all affected right now. You don't have to come in to film your scene.
Oprah's
Because
like, yeah, right.
Yeah, and then, but that was hard for her as a
Yeah.
director to say, being on such a short schedule, she's like, we'll figure it out. We can reschedule you. We'll figure it out. And Oprah was like, no, I can get through this. And she came to the set that day, and they still filmed
I feel like
everything.
you know, if Oprah is helping you out, if you get a little money problem, Oprah, you know, we can use extra days shooting.
Well, I mean, the budget of this film was only $20 million.
20 million.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
$20 million, 32 days of shooting, and you're talking about it making, right now, I think about $33 million.
Should be so much more.
So much more.
But
But yeah.
good news
But, yeah.
is it has
It
gained
is
money,
limited.
and people are talking about it,
Yeah.
and it has such great feedback from everyone
Yeah.
who has gone to the theater and seen it.
How many theaters? Do we know how many theaters it's in now? I feel like it went wide last week.
I want to say it's like everywhere now because
'Cause
I
I
saw
feel
an
like,
ad
yeah,
for
Martin
it and it was
Luther-
like showing everywhere.
MLK weekend, I think it expanded
Martin
wide.
Luther.
I believe it did
Yeah.
come out last week.
I would
We
hope
should
so
know
because
this.
Yeah.
because
I was just
it's
shocked
such,
it made like $8 million that weekend. I thought it would make so much more.
I did too.
especially being MLK weekend.
Exactly.
But I feel like this movie will live on.
Oh yeah.
I mean, other movies, they're timely, but this is such, I mean, there's a whole Martin Luther King Day. It's such an historical, pivotal moment in America and the government and just civil rights in and of itself. It's never going to go away.
Yeah, it's a great
People
movie.
are always going to remember this.
Yeah.
I applaud it.
We all
There
like
you
this
go.
movie, everybody.
We
all
did
really
love
like
it.
that
And-
from the review so far.
Yes. If
We
you
love
haven't
this one.
gotten
We
that
all like it.
message, what do we think of the fact that it didn't get as many nominations, or it's not immediately getting the recognition that it should be?
I was worried it wasn't gonna get Best Picture nominated. I was really worried about that. So when it did get nominated, I was a little relieved. I was like, okay, it's in the Best Picture nom. This will give us some more. Not because I just want to win awards, because I want more people to know about it. I want people to be watching nominations, and be like, oh, Selma. Oh yeah, that's that Martin Luther King movie. It must be really good. So now maybe more people go see it. I totally think she should have been nominated for Best Director.
I agree.
Which she
Yeah,
wasn't.
she should have.
I agree.
And again, David should be in that top 5. There's a couple people I would take out of there and put him in there.
Yeah.
And it boggles me.
It'd be hard for Ava too, because this is her big first feature film, really, and she's in the public eye. And if you think about it, there's only been 4 female directors who've ever been nominated for Academy Award, and only one has won.
She would have been
Catherine Bigelow.
She would have been the first African American nominated
She
for Best
would have
Director.
been.
And she totally deserved it.
And
That's
she
what's-
didn't get
We
it.
should start marching. Let's march on Hollywood, everybody.
And I agree that
Get her-
It's not 50 miles, but we can do it.
We could do it.
I agree she should have been nominated. I am excited that it's up for Best
Picture.
Picture.
And yeah, it's a bummer, and especially because being that it wasn't nominated for Best Director or Best Actor, I don't think it's gonna win.
It's not going to win.
No.
So
Whatever even though they've gone to 10, or 8 to 10 or whatever, you look at the best directors, those are usually usually the movies that would have been in your top 5
Yeah.
if there wasn't
it's kind of like the more top categories you got, the more like you're gonna win. And right now it only has 1 top category. So
I bet the Academy will give it best songs just to give it something.
I agree.
It's a great song. It's been
is.
stuck in my head for a week.
Really?
But also Carmen and John Legend, very well known artists
Yep.
in the industry. So
He
I
did
mean,
fine in the movie too, Carmen.
yeah, Carmen did great. And so for him to depict a historical figure as well, I mean, it affects a lot of people. And I really like, this is the movie to get that message across, that this is what America went through. And, be happy and thankful for, where we are today.
Can I mention one more thing? When it comes to those 2 young men who were part of SNCC, I really enjoyed that they weren't both like
On
gung-ho,
board.
let's join.
Yeah.
There was this 2 different ideas of how they should be doing things, and I like how they used that to portray not all the youngsters were team Martin Luther King, and I love the fact that the other guy was just, they had this really kind of relationship,
Reluctant.
the reluctant relationship, and I thought it was a great way of showing how the people weren't all on his side.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also coming around to the realization that, yes, there's a bigger picture out there, not just what my personal
can't be your
opinion is.
ego.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not my personal opinion. This is for everybody. And this movie is for everybody. I really think. I enjoyed this. everyone who's listening, I'm assuming you have listened to it, suggest this movie. I've been suggesting this movie to everybody.
Yeah.
This is one of those films that will just stick with you.
I told my sister I'm gonna take her to see it probably this weekend.
There you go.
Because
Yeah.
she hadn't seen it. I was like, listen, I'm dragging you to movies to see this thing because it's the best movie I've seen all year. She's like, okay.
Okay.
So I'm doing my part, people.
Everyone, chip in.
We are.
Yeah.
So great film overall.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Loved
listen,
it.
number one
Loved
film
it.
of the year for me. 5 out of 5. It's a porn film. It's a great film. Everyone should see it.
Yes.
There you go.
End of sentence.
Drop the mic.
Drop the mic.
And with that, where can everyone keep following you to talk about great films?
Well, me and Sarah have our own show called Box Office Breakdown. We do it every Monday where we cover the box office numbers. You can catch me on Schmoes No Movie Show. I have my own podcast now called JTE Movie Things that I do, where I just interview people talking about movies.
There you go.
Pretty simple. It's what I'm good
So
at.
you talk about movies.
Yeah, well,
A little bit?
I basically, the premise of the show is I ask the person who I interview, what's the last movie you watched? Not whether it be on your iPad, at home, at Netflix.
Just a movie.
And for me going in, I don't know what movie it's going to be. So it's kind of exciting for me because I never know what I'm going to talk about. Fortunately, I've seen just about every movie ever made, so I usually am able to
shouldn't
talk.
say that because like people are gonna like bring out
But listen, if-
movies out of the woodwork.
But you know what?
Like I'm gonna make you talk about like
Well, you haven't
Indian
seen
in
The
the
Butler.
cupboard.
I haven't seen The Butler, but
Go
I could
watch
take
The
that
Butler.
conversation and make it to Selma.
There you
I'll I get, but yeah, at SchmoesJT for Twitter. Nah, there you go. I'm everywhere.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sarah doesn't have a Twitter, by the way.
I don't.
No, she doesn't.
No.
Can we march for that? Can we start getting a
Eventually,
Twitter?
one day she will
I'm
crack.
gonna march from here to my cell phone.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Serafini TV. You can follow all of us on Twitter at Movie Anatomy, and you can follow our download, subscribe, rate, comment, keep talking about great films, and at Popcorn Talk. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on iTunes, Popcorn Talk Network. There you'll find other awesome shows about films because that's what we do. That's what we love. We love talking about it. We won't stop talking about it. We won't stop talking about this film because it's so darn good.
Yeah, thanks for having me on Anatomy.
Yes,
it's nice
of course.
to be on
Thank
the
you,
mic once.
JTE. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will see you for our next film.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.